The St. Louis Church in the Modern World by David Masick and Jason Capra.
Archbishop Ritter's biography. He was born in 1892 in Indiana and was the fourth of Nicholas and Bertha Ritter's 6 children. Religion was very important in his life. He attended a private Catholic school during his elementary years, and in 7th grade decided that priesthood was his future. So he attended St. Meinrad's Seminary, which is a school for future priests. He completed his studies in 1917 and was ordained a priest by Bishop Joseph Chartrand. Ritter was a great priest and eventually was made the Archbishop of St. Louis. He even sent people, when he was Archbishop, he sent people across the border to Bolivia and South America. He focused his efforts on education and training of the upcoming priests in training, teaching them to give respect to traditions and cultures of the locals as much as possible. So when they were sent out, they were told to introduce people to the ideas, but not force the ideas upon them. How has Ritter influenced the church in St. Louis? Ritter was an advocate for people's voices that were not being heard at the time. Ritter served as a leader in education, specifically Catholic education, and was an advocate for immigrants and other minorities. One of Ritter's biggest controversies was racially integrating St. Louis Catholic schools. Many people were outraged by this. When local Catholics threatened to take the matters to the civil authorities, Ritter responded with a promise of automatic excommunication for anyone who may interfere with African American children entering these white Catholic schools. He also did other works. He worked closely with Father Elmer Berman to increase the number of quality schools and churches offering education for special needs students during his time as Archbishop.
Mission/evangelization. During the early 20th century, St. Louis's population started to grow with a diverse population, 17 of which being African American people from the rural South. When Archbishop Ritter arrived in St. Louis in 1946, he felt there should be a change. His mission was to end segregation within St. Louis schools, or Catholic schools, with him instructing all pastors in the archdiocese to end racial segregation within Catholic schools. Archbishop Ritter took action on the desegregation of schools within the St. Louis area almost 7 years before the U.S. Supreme Court did with the nation's public schools. Corruption. Archbishop Ritter's acts weren't without controversy. Catholics who were against his decision made an effort to revert back to the segregated school systems. Opposed Catholics made an effort to take legal action in the civil courts. However, Archbishop Ritter learned of their plans. Justice. Archbishop Ritter wrote a letter to parish congregation, saying that any civil lawsuits would result in an automatic excommunication, which would later quickly disband groups opposed to his decisions, ending racial segregation. He was later widely praised on not only his decision to end racial segregation within St. Louis Catholic schools, but also his actions on enforcing it.
So a group persecuted at this time was the African American community. But during this time, it was the time of great reform and controversy, not only in St. Louis, but throughout the world. During this time, communism was a major fear of the U.S., and with the massive stockpiling of nuclear weapons by both the U.S. and the USSR during the Cold War, it caused a lot of stress among Americans and other people. Adding to this, the Korean and Vietnam Wars also added another layer of stress to this and made everyone on edge. Even back in the U.S., there were a lot of movements going on, most notably the Civil Rights Movement. During this time, everything was segregated: restaurants, schools, even places for recreation, such as parks and anything else like that. And with everything being labeled a white only or colored only, this created a huge problem. So like white only utilities such as water fountains, schools, anything like that were better quality and better shape. And colored only things were worse. But if a colored person was seen trying to use or be in a place that was labeled white only and they weren't supposed to, they were beaten and sometimes thrown in jail for basically nothing. And throughout most of history, the African American community had been suffering, and especially now, they were being excluded from a lot of things and kind of thrown aside and treated like trash. So, Cardinal Ritter would be a major part of this change coming to help the African American community and get them more involved with the community and to get them some better treatment. His idea of reform was, well, first of all, segregation was not prominent just in St. Louis, but it was around the country. Everything was segregated: white only, colored only. Colored only was in worse condition. People were struggling, treated poor. The people of color had poor wages. They were put in jail for crimes they didn't commit sometimes. So the African American community was struggling, and they were really put in just a bad way of life, really. And Archbishop Ritter would try to fix some of these problems associated with segregation. So on September 5th, 1947, Ritter quietly instructed Catholic schools to admit black children to the previously all-white Catholic schools. So protests erupted as classes began in September. Colonel Ritter was tired of slavery because it went against Catholic teachings. People did not like this. Protesters wanted to meet with Archbishop Ritter to discuss this matter, but he refused. This led protesters wanting to take him to court. However, this didn't happen. Ritter just stated that excommunication would be a punishment for segregation of Catholic schools, and eventually Ritter prevailed, and Catholic schools were integrated. How does Ritter empower me? Ritter empowers me because he displays that everyone needs to be treated equally and deserves an equal opportunity for education and religious practices.
Ritter empowers me because he made an effort to do what was right, even though there were many that were preying on his downfall. He showed everyone during that time period that everyone should have an equal opportunity, with no regard to their race.